When Sylvester Stallone pulled up in his battered gray Ford pickup, no one paid much attention. He wore a plain black t-shirt stretched over his broad shoulders, faded jeans, and an old Phillies baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. His gait was steady but unhurried, the slight stiffness in his left knee a reminder of years spent doing his own stunts, though hardly anyone at the club recognized him at first glance. At the front desk, a young woman with manicured nails and a headset glanced up, offering a polished smile that faltered when she saw the stranger. "Can I help you, sir?" she said, scanning the list of VIPs and finding no match. "I'm here for the open challenge," Stallone said, his voice a gravelly rumble. The receptionist's smile tightened. "This event's mostly for active competitors and sponsors' guests, sir." Stallone nodded patiently and slid a printed pass across the counter. "Got this invitation from Charlie Reyes, old buddy of mine." Her eyes widened slightly at the name. Charlie Reyes was a retired Marine and a local legend who consulted for the club. Begrudgingly, she waved him through. Still, as Stallone made his way toward the basic firing lanes, he could feel the glances, the whispered jokes. Near the main shooting area, Hunter Maddox was holding court, laughing with a circle of admirers. His tan was fresh, his Oakley shades perched perfectly atop his head. He spotted Stallone walking by and grinned, elbowing one of his buddies. "Hey!" he called out loudly, drawing attention. "Looks like someone's grandpa wandered out of the Bass Pro Shop." The group burst out laughing. A few turned their phones toward Stallone, half expecting some kind of confrontation. Stallone didn't flinch. He simply found an empty lane at the far end, placed his battered duffel bag down, and began methodically setting up. From the bag, he pulled out a modest Smith & Wesson M&P9 pistol, not exactly the kind of high-end competition weapon favored by the regulars here. Hunter, sensing an opportunity for more entertainment, strolled over, his entourage in tow. "You sure you're in the right place, Pops?" Hunter asked, feigning concern. "This ain't no old-timers league." Stallone glanced up, his eyes hidden beneath the brim of his cap. "Just here to practice," Hunter laughed. "Practice? You're better off knitting a sweater. Tell you what, I'll make it interesting." He raised his voice so the nearby crowd could hear. "I'll bet $10,000, straight to the Wounded Warriors Project, that you can't hit a bullseye at 50 yards on your first shot. And if you miss, you pack up and head home. Deal?" A few people chuckled nervously. It was outrageous. Even seasoned shooters knew 50 yards with a standard pistol was no joke. Stallone stood quietly, his hand resting lightly on the M&P9. Then he nodded once. "Deal," he said. The range master, a wiry old man named Joe Danvers, overheard and wandered over, frowning. Joe had been running shooting events since Reagan was president, and he didn't like the smell of public humiliation. "You sure about this, sir?" Joe asked Stallone quietly. "Yeah," Stallone said. "Let's give him a show." Hunter leaned back, flashing his megawatt smile to the gathering crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, get your phones ready. You're about to witness a disaster." Stallone stepped to the line. His movements were calm, deliberate. He took a long breath, remembering those long, hot days on set during Rambo 2, when real Navy SEAL instructors had taught him the fundamentals of survival, of precision, of staying calm when everything around you was chaos. He squared his shoulders, planted his feet, and aligned the sights with a steadiness that came not from competition, but from a lifetime of doing what others said couldn't be done. He squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked through the heavy summer air. Silence. The mechanical whir of the target retrieval system filled the void as the paper silhouette zipped toward the firing line. And there it was, a clean, perfect hole, dead center of the bullseye. The crowd gasped audibly. Hunter's smile froze, then faltered. He rushed forward to examine the target himself, then spun around. "Beginner's luck," he barked, his voice a little too sharp. "Anyone can get lucky once." The range master, Joe, walked over, shaking his head slowly, the beginnings of a grin tugging at his mouth. "That's no beginner's luck," Joe muttered under his breath. Hunter, still trying to save face, called out, "Double or nothing. A real contest. You and me. Full course. 10 stations, increasing difficulty. Club's rules." There was a beat of silence. Every eye turned to Stallone. He reached up, adjusting the brim of his cap. "If we do this," Stallone said, voice steady as a Texas oak, "winner donates all proceeds to charity. Loser shakes the winner's hand. Like gentlemen." Hunter hesitated, then nodded. "Deal." Joe Danvers gave a soft whistle. "This just got real interesting," he said to no one in particular. And just like that, the showdown was set. The old lion versus the young king. Across the range, whispers ran like wildfire. Who was this guy? How did he shoot like that? Some were already Googling, faces lighting up as they realized they weren't just looking at any old man. They were looking at Sylvester Stallone. But the man himself didn't seem to notice or care. He just leaned casually against the lane divider, arms folded, waiting for the next round to begin. The battle for respect had only just begun. The range officials moved with quick precision, setting up the 10 shooting stations across the sprawling grounds, each one increasing in complexity and distance. Targets varied from standard bullseyes to moving silhouettes and precision steel plates barely larger than a silver dollar. Hunter Maddox took his time, inspecting each station, his confident swagger returning with every step. His entourage followed, offering smirks and hushed jokes that rippled like static through the humid air. Stallone, meanwhile, stayed silent. He sat on a worn wooden bench near the starting line, wiping down his Smith & Wesson with a faded cloth, seemingly oblivious to the spectacle building around him. But inside, he was steadying himself, remembering the old lessons from a lifetime ago, lessons about focus, breathing, blocking out the noise until there was only the target and the shot. As the first station was called, Hunter stepped up with dramatic flair, adjusting the customized Kimber pistol provided by the club. He took 2 quick shots, each hitting near the center, drawing nods of approval from the crowd. Then it was Stallone's turn. He approached the line without ceremony, lifted the pistol, and with a breath so subtle it barely stirred the dust at his feet, squeezed off 2 shots. Both punched the bullseye with surgical precision. A murmur ran through the audience. Some phones were already recording, trying to capture what felt like the beginning of something nobody had expected. The second station involved a moving target at 30 yards, a challenge even seasoned competitors respected. Hunter went first, hitting 3 of 5 shots cleanly, grinning as he turned back to the crowd. Stallone stepped up, scanned the movement, and fired methodically. 5 shots, 5 hits, the last one catching the target just before it zipped out of range. The onlookers shifted uneasily, excitement and disbelief mingling in the thick Texas heat. As the stations progressed, the differences in style became more pronounced. Hunter was flashy, quick, and showy, his shots good, but occasionally rushed. Stallone, in contrast, was deliberate, composed, almost detached from the spectacle. Each movement was economical, each shot a study in quiet control. By the fifth station, word had spread beyond the club grounds. People arriving for late afternoon matches found themselves drawn toward the main range, their conversations dying off as they watched the unexpected drama unfold. At Station 6, the difficulty increased. Shooters had to use a .45 caliber Colt to hit reactive steel plates at 60 yards. Hunter, brimming with bravado, made 3 out of 5, cursing under his breath at a missed shot that bounced harmlessly off the dirt. Stallone stepped up, adjusted his grip slightly, and rang 5 consecutive plates with an almost casual air. The sun dipped lower, casting a warm amber glow across the Texas sky, and for a brief moment the range was utterly still except for the steady clink, clink, clink of his shots finding their mark. By the 7th station, Hunter's confidence had started to crack. He barked at one of the officials about the wind, complained about the lighting, but everyone could see what was happening. This wasn't just a good day for an old-timer. This was something else, something rarer and deeper. Stallone wasn't competing for a trophy or a title. He was fighting for something invisible yet tangible, something that people like Hunter, for all their polished gear and sponsorships, might never fully understand. At Station 8, the match drew tighter. Both men faced a grueling test, hitting 10 spinning targets at 40 yards within a strict time limit. Hunter went first, moving quickly but missing 2 targets, his frustration barely hidden behind a clenched jaw. Stallone approached with that same unshakable calm, his footsteps slow, deliberate. When the buzzer sounded, he didn't rush. He let each shot flow from the last, each movement smooth as a river current. When the dust cleared, 8 out of 10 targets had fallen, just enough to edge him ahead by the slimmest of margins. The crowd was no longer laughing or whispering jokes. They were leaning forward, silent, captivated by a duel they hadn't known they needed to witness. Somewhere along the way, this had stopped being a show and had become a battle of spirit, of character, of heart. As they prepared for Station 9, Hunter approached Stallone, his grin gone, replaced by a thin, tight-lipped expression. "Impressive, old man," he said, voice low, almost grudging. "Maybe there's still some fight left in the past." Stallone just looked at him, his face unreadable. "Ain't about the past," he said. "It's about doing the job right every time." Hunter turned away sharply, and the 2 men took their positions for the penultimate challenge, a double-tap course at mixed distances, testing both accuracy and speed. Hunter moved with sharp, practiced motions, landing most of his shots, but rushing the final target and missing wide. Stallone, by contrast, took his time between shots, recentering himself after every burst. His bullets found the target with clinical precision. By the end of the station, they were tied, with the final challenge left to decide it all. The last station loomed like a mountain, 100 yards, with custom-made AR platforms provided by the club. It was a shot that demanded not just skill, but mastery. Steady breathing, wind correction, flawless trigger control. As they prepared, the late afternoon shadows lengthened, and a soft breeze stirred the flags atop the firing lanes. Hunter stepped to the line first, his face a mask of forced calm. He fired 10 rounds, each one a carefully measured shot. 9 hit inside the center rings. 1 drifted slightly wide. A strong performance by any standard, and enough that Hunter turned back toward the crowd with a look that dared them to doubt him. Stallone stepped up. He handled the rifle like a craftsman lifting a trusted tool, adjusting the stock, aligning the sights without rush. He closed one eye, drew in a slow breath, and let it out halfway before squeezing the trigger. The first shot cracked across the field, and the crowd watched the impact marker flutter squarely in the center. He worked the rifle smoothly, every shot following the same rhythm. Breathe, aim, squeeze. With each round, the suspense built. 7 perfect hits. 8, 9. The 10th shot came after a moment's pause, Stallone adjusting slightly for the shifting wind. The final crack echoed across the range, and the impact marker fluttered dead center once again. For a heartbeat, there was silence so deep, it seemed as if the earth itself was holding its breath. Then the crowd erupted into spontaneous applause, a raw, genuine sound that swept across the grounds like a summer storm. Stallone stood there, calm and almost solemn, as if absorbing the energy, but not needing it. Hunter remained frozen at his lane, disbelief written plainly across his features. The range master approached, checking the targets carefully, then raising Stallone's hand with a wide grin. The old fighter had done it again, not with noise or arrogance, but with the quiet power of a man who knew exactly who he was and what he could do. And for the first time that day, Hunter Maddox extended his hand toward Sylvester Stallone, not with mockery or resentment, but with something very close to respect. The sun was dipping behind the rolling Texas hills, casting a warm amber haze over the Lone Star Precision Shooting Club. The final echoes of applause still hung in the heavy air as Stallone accepted Hunter's handshake, firm but not triumphant. There was no gloating, no show of superiority, just a quiet understanding that in a real test of skill and spirit, true respect had been earned. Hunter's hand lingered a moment longer than necessary before he nodded and stepped back, swallowing whatever bitterness might have risen in his throat. The range master announced the official results, his voice crackling through the old loudspeaker. First place, Mr. Sylvester Stallone, donation to Wounded Warriors Project. $50,000, courtesy of Mr. Maddox, and generously matched by the Lone Star Club Board of Directors. Another ripple of applause moved through the crowd, more genuine this time, as spectators found themselves caught between disbelief and admiration. Stallone retrieved his duffel bag without ceremony. As he slung it over his shoulder, a few younger shooters approached, their faces shy but lit with excitement. "Sir," one of them said, barely 20 years old, that was the coolest thing I've ever seen." Stallone smiled, a small, knowing smile. "Appreciate it," he said simply. Another man, older, wearing a veteran's cap, stitched with the emblem of the 82nd Airborne, stepped forward, extending his hand. "You made us proud today," he said, voice thick with emotion. Stallone gripped his hand firmly, feeling the calluses, the weight of shared understanding between men who valued grit over glamour. By the time he made it back to his truck, the sun had fully set, and the stars were beginning to blink awake in the vast Texas sky. Stallone leaned against the hood for a moment, breathing in the cool night air, letting the tension of the day melt from his shoulders. He thought about the journey that had brought him here. Not just the miles traveled, but the years endured. Hollywood had made him a star. Yes, but it had been the lessons learned long before fame. Lessons about resilience, humility, and perseverance that had shaped the man who stood there now. Across the lot, Hunter Maddox stood near his luxury SUV, head bowed as he spoke quietly with his manager. The younger man looked up once, catching Stallone's gaze across the distance. There was no more mockery in his eyes, only a grudging respect, and perhaps a twinge of something else. Understanding that greatness wasn't measured by endorsements or shiny trophies, but by how a man carried himself when the odds turned against him. The club's director, an older woman named Caroline Whitaker, approached cautiously, her heels clicking lightly against the asphalt. "Mr. Stallone," she said, slightly out of breath, "I just wanted to say, what you did today meant more than you probably realize." Stallone nodded, offering a small smile. "Wasn't about proving anything," he said, his voice low. "It was about keeping a promise to myself." She hesitated, then added, "If you're ever interested, we'd be honored to have you host a workshop here. For the Veterans Shooting Program, we're starting next season. You'd be an inspiration." Stallone's eyebrows lifted slightly in surprise. He hadn't come looking for opportunities. He hadn't come looking for anything, really. But something about the offer stirred a memory deep inside him, a promise he'd made to himself long ago, to never turn away from a chance to lift someone else up. "I'll think about it," he said, meaning it. As the lot emptied and the night deepened, Stallone climbed into his truck and started the engine. The familiar rumble vibrated through his hands as he pulled onto the quiet road leading away from the club. The open fields stretched wide and silent around him, the kind of stillness you don't find in Hollywood or in New York or anywhere ambition burns too hot. Out here, the world had room to breathe. He rolled down the window, letting the cool air whip across his face, and drove without hurry, no destination in mind, beyond the satisfaction of a promise kept and a respect earned the hard way. In the days that followed, news of the match spread like wildfire. Local papers picked it up first. The Austin Chronicle ran the headline, "Old Lion Roars, Stallone Shocks the Shooting World." Then national outlets followed. Talk shows debated whether it was a publicity stunt, though those who had been there knew better. Footage captured by smartphones circulated online, millions of views piling up within hours. Commentators marveled not just at Stallone's skill, but at the way he had carried himself, gracious in victory, quiet in dignity. Veterans groups across the country reached out, sharing clips of the event, using it as a rallying cry, proof that age, loss, and the passage of time couldn't extinguish spirit. Stallone didn't comment publicly. He turned down interviews, ignored offers from talk shows eager to capitalize on the buzz. This wasn't about fame. Fame he already had. This was about something quieter, more personal, a victory that belonged not to headlines, but to the heart. Back in Austin a week later, the Lone Star Club held a small private ceremony. Hunter Maddox stood before a gathering of veterans and donors, a check in his hand for $100,000, doubled from the original bet thanks to matching donations. Stallone was there too, dressed the same as always, standing off to the side, not seeking the spotlight, but nevertheless becoming the center of it. When it came time to speak, Hunter cleared his throat, the microphone crackling slightly. "I came into last week thinking I had something to teach," he said, glancing toward Stallone, "but I learned more than I ever expected. About respect, about perseverance, about what real greatness looks like." He turned toward Stallone, lifting the check slightly. "This," he said, "is in honor of every man and woman who ever stood tall when it would have been easier to sit down." The applause that followed wasn't raucous. It was steady, deep, and real, the kind of applause that says more than words ever could. Stallone accepted the gesture with a small nod, then quietly left the stage, content to let others take the spotlight. That evening, he visited the new shooting clinic the club had started with the proceeds. He watched as veterans, some young, some old, practiced together, their faces lit with purpose, their laughter rising into the warm night air. He smiled, feeling a sense of peace settle over him, a rare gift in a restless world. Driving home under the endless Texas sky, Stallone thought about how life had a way of bringing a man full circle. No matter how far you traveled, no matter how high you climbed, the things that mattered most were always the same: honor, heart, and the courage to stand your ground when the world expected you to fall. As he crested a small hill, the city lights of Austin blinking far in the distance, he touched the brim of his old Phillies cap in a silent salute. To the past, to the battles fought and the promises kept, and to the simple, enduring truth that sometimes the quietest victories are the ones that echo the longest.